so AI and robots and automation in general, is an opportunity for everybody who thinks that they can be replaced. So everything that you do online is recorded somewhere.
Wasn't that the whole issue with TikTok?
I think hustle culture just needs to go away.
Welcome to Simple Conversations with ASG.
So tell me, who is Jay Greaves?
So I am a tech entrepreneur. I've been a software developer for almost 30 years now. And probably 20 years ago, I got the itch to go out on my own and been out on my own ever since. I built companies, started figuring out how to hire people. And so I became your kind of solopreneur startup success story back before there were words to put to it.
Yeah, what was the term back then? Because now it is solopreneur. I think woke has made it solopreneur. It used to be entrepreneur, but what was it before that?
So entrepreneur and freelancer were kind of mixed together. They really mean different things. So freelancer is more just a company of one where you're responsible for everything, whereas an entrepreneur typically is trying to build something that grows. They want to make something bigger than themselves. And while I definitely have that ambition, I'm sure we'll talk about that later. In the meantime, it really started as just, I want to keep my head above water and I want things to be the right kind of hard. So working for other people just started rubbing me the wrong way. I don't deal well with authority and doing things I don't believe in. And so eventually I got to the point where I had enough skills that I could pick and choose who I worked with. And once I got a taste of that, like at this point, the thought of having what most people consider to be a real job is just terrifying to me.
What's annoying you this week, Jay?
Oh, the enshittification of everything online. So do you know this word?
I've
Do you know
heard
the
it.
word enshittification?
Yeah. I've seen it bounced around, but I don't fully know yet.
Okay, so Cory Doctorow is the one who coined it a few years back. It was the American Dialect Society Word of the Year 2023, Cory Dictionary Word of the Year last year. And really what it's talking about is this new cycle where platforms, online companies, build something that's great for people. And lots of people show up, they use it, they get a ton of value. It's just wonderful. And then they make things a little bit worse for all those users, but make it a little bit better for companies so they can sell to companies and enterprises. And then the companies and enterprises come in and the users still stick around because it's, hard to change. But then once there's enough companies, then they make it a little bit worse for everyone so that it's better for themselves. And you have all kinds of examples like Amazon Prime, right? You're spending over $100 a year here in the US. And then they said, oh, but we're going to throw in commercials now unless you pay us even more. And we know that you will because you want the stuff that we are making available. Or all those companies that say, oh, the price is going up, but we have these new features in here and you don't really want the features. They're just kind of shoving them down your throat. So, or Facebook, Facebook's Facebook used to be great and now it is less than great. So that has been really annoying me in particular because there are good counterexamples. So Duolingo, oh my gosh, they are fantastic. And if you've ever listened to an interview with one of their founders, he is very adamant that they will always have a free tier. He even said he could make tens of millions of dollars the following week if they just switched to a trial, got rid of the free tier, but it would take that educational resource away from millions. And so Duolingo is the opposite of enshittification. They are building functionality and they've set things up to where there's lots of people that want to pay for it and they subsidize the people who simply can't. And yet Duolingo has left all this money on the table because they said, we're making enough and we want to make a difference in the world. So enshittification has been really annoying me. I run a software company. I use tons of services. They're all getting a little bit worse every single year. So glad I could rant. Thank you.
The main one that comes to mind when you made that description is X or Twitter. Now it has pissing me off so much. Anyone that follows me on Twitter, I put out a thing not long ago saying if you follow me here, just try and follow me somewhere else because I'm not using it much more anymore. The verification plans of as low as $5, but you get a tiny bit of boost, won't get a lot. You want to pay $30 a month, we'll give you all the boost, but we're not going to let anybody follow you. And then just so much shit. Like, there were so many things when Elon took over about it's going to be creator based, there's going to be videos, there's going to be media, and then now there is media, but to get on the media tab you need to pay for verification, so you can't actually be a creator on Twitter until you pay for it. It's so stupid. Like, I've had so many people that like I came up with on social media that are no longer on it. Like, there's one of the guys sold his account. He had like 150k followers because it was just, he literally said it was becoming too much admin to post on social media.
Yeah. And the thing is, Twitter has and X has lots of difficult problems to solve, no doubt about it. But the thing that makes enshittification annoying is it is a deliberate choice that you, as the user, the consumer, understand. And you know that the only reason it's being done is for value capture. And, I'm an entrepreneur. I have nothing against value capture. It's part of the two-sided coin, right? Value creation and value capture. But at a certain point, you start acting like a monopoly and saying, well, we're going to charge you more, not because you get more out of it. We haven't provided more value, but simply because we can. And that's when it starts rubbing people the wrong way. So that's what makes it an annoyance.
Yeah, there's another annoyance I have with it is Netflix, because I love Netflix's documentaries. I think they're the best. Like, I don't think anybody makes them better, to be honest. I know ESPN's got some good sport ones, but Netflix, I think, takes the biscuit with it. But I get emails almost every month saying that they're going up because like the price is going up, especially the ad plan that I'm on. I'm not paying for no ads. It's like £10 more, and it's not worth it, to be honest. But I get emails all the time, and I haven't even opened them to say that the price is going up slightly and slightly. And someone asked me today, like, why not open them? Why not see it when it's got up to? It's good. There's too much value in it. I know I'm not going to cancel it. It could go up to 10 quid. I'm still going to have it. I'm just going to have to just bite the bullet with the ads. But
Right.
it goes to what
that.
you're talking about. Exactly. They know I'm going to stay there. It's just, I'm going to get into a twirl with this. But I thought about this about my watch annoying me because I wanted one to kind of complement the topic today, which is big tech in specific. And there's one that's really been getting at me for a while, and specifically because I had an issue with Spotify duplicating my podcast page and then flagging me as a bot. And I tried for so long to get it removed. Like, I pretty much couldn't post on Spotify for months. And the main thing I was banging into the wall that was blocking me was every time I went to contact support, it was a robot with formulated responses that just did not have any choice of helping me at all. It was horrible. I had to then go through my emails and see when I set up the first page and try and get the guy's email who emailed me to say it was confirmed, set up, and email him to get it fixed. But these contact supports, AI bots, they need to go in the bin ASAP, like in the bin straight away. I can't deal with them.
Yeah, the ones that are designed to give you information. So in other words, if you don't know how to do something, the bots are fantastic, especially now with, LLMs and AI. They do an excellent job answering your question. But when you need action taken, and when you need action taken, when there's something where it's like, hey, there's no amount of you telling me about how things work that fixes my issue. Then getting straight to the person who can exercise their judgment and take action is key. But that's where we run into the constant tension between people are expensive, software is cheap. And so, you're seeing this in headlines all the time now. Like, companies are proud of how many people they're shedding or not hiring because they believe that software can replace it. And there are trade-offs here. There's some things that you really need a person in order to serve your clients kind of how you promised you would. And that's where I think there's a lot of backlash starting and even more coming, because lots of folks will feel like we signed up for something and now you're not delivering it. You're just making the excuse that, oh, the software isn't quite there yet. Well, put a person back in the loop. And this is coming from a software guy. Like, believe me, I know the limits of these things, and they are not where everybody claims they are. I think they're being used a lot of times as an excuse. And then you end up in your situation where you ended up spending, hours of time and who knows how much energy to just get something done that was a simple thing. Like, this is me. I did it. You verified me. Can we go back to the way it was?
So it's annoying me so much. But I've been kind of thinking about this the last few days about the AI and the whole robotics thing, because I'm good friends with past guests on the show, Thomas Haynes, and he works with AI systems and stuff, and he's been telling me some incredible things it's doing, and showed me some like even videos and stuff it's fully generating, and it's mind blowing, some of the things. But it got me thinking about the whole fear people have, and like AI and robots are going to kind of take over. And I don't really know where to whittle it down. Part of me kind of believes it's because we are scared that human interaction is going to kind of disappear or it's going to be minimized. Like you said, a lot of jobs are now automating departments. What do you think the fear is that we have that AI and robots are going to take over the world?
I think a lot of it comes from people being worried about themselves, that they are worried that they're not good enough, in large part because they're being told that, right? So look at, you're talking about social media a little bit earlier. Social media and advertising exists to make you feel inadequate and then sell you the solution to that. And when you kind of go up the chain a little bit to people's jobs, this whole idea that everybody's replaceable and, you better do a good job because there's X number of people waiting for it. Now there's cheaper, faster robots or software or, I'm old enough that I remember switching from being a programmer because there was, a lot of money in that. I caught the internet boom. I could spell HTML. I could make a fortune. And then in the early 2000s, the whispers were, okay, your job's going overseas. Like, we can do it faster and cheaper there. And my response to that was, okay, well, if it can be done faster and cheaper there, then it's not my job anymore. My job is to do something else. And so I did something else. And I think where we are going practically with AI and robots is there are a lot of jobs that people don't particularly want to do. They will do it because they feel like they have to. And that's where, again, we face a tension between what people say they want and what they actually want. And once we replace a lot of the jobs that people don't particularly want to do, the fear is that there's going to be nothing else to go for. Like, okay, well, if I can't do this very basic thing because it's replaced by either AI or robot, then there's no safety net. But I think you can actually turn that around and recognize that right here today, there is something that almost everybody can do that isn't easily replaced with a robot or AI. It simply means doing something that is new, something that is challenging, something that is scary, and going out and figuring out how to make it work. So right here, talking to you, this is a prime example. I'm likely to go on an AI generated podcast with an AI host and have it all be automated. Because even if they nailed the formula, it wouldn't feel the same. It wouldn't feel like a discussion. And so you are doing something right now that is kind of hard to truly replace. And yet there are lots of people out there, I'm sure, who are working on like AI podcast systems, and they'll come out, there'll be tons of articles about, hey, check this out, check that out. They might even get some big name guests, and yet it won't be the same thing. So it'll be adjacent to what you're doing, but not a direct replacement. And so I think that this is kind of a forcing function. So AI and robots and automation in general is an opportunity for everybody who thinks that they can be replaced to really prove that they can't. And when it comes down to it, I don't think you can replace people, like truly replace people with AI and robots, even though you can do lots of jobs that people currently do using AI and robots. Let's have people do something else.
Yeah, I thought about this in the gym earlier. The AI now where it is, I know it's advancing a little bit, but it's kind of still in the beginner phase. It's just replacing outdated practices, really. Like you think of ChatGPT or Gemini that Google has, it's only kind of replacing like Klarna or AQA or Google search. Like the information they're getting isn't pulled from some genius who's not online. Like it's coming from Google search results. You could go and find them. It might just be on page 10 instead of page 2. I don't know. I think that people are having this constant fear that at some point their boss is going to walk into their office and go, "You're fired. This is replacing you," and it's going to be something that looks like R2D2 walking through the door. That's the thing, and it's just not gonna. It might get very advanced. I know they're raising a lot of money to make it advanced. It's not going to get to that point.
Sure. And on the other side of that, you have the people who fear being replaced also have access to the technology. So ChatGPT is a great example. And even though there are a bunch of other models out there and a bunch of other capabilities, that's the one that almost everybody talks about because it's like the iPhone of AI, right? That there were plenty of, there are plenty of smartphones, and yet people talk about iPhone or the iPod, right? There were tons of MP3 players before the iPod came out. That changed everything. So ChatGPT, very accessible and powerful in ways that people are just now figuring out how to apply. So you read lots of articles and stuff like that. There's lots of hype. But when it comes down to it, what ChatGPT lets anyone do for even the free tier, but especially at the $20 a month tier, is ask questions and get reasonable answers in a very tight feedback loop without any judgment. So I work with a partner, and her use of ChatGPT far exceeds mine, meaning 10x, 20x, whatever. And one of the things that she loves about using it is she can ask it what she might feel like is a stupid question without feeling stupid. And so, as much as I try to remind her, hey, there's no reason why you should know all these things. So she doesn't want to ask me technical things because she doesn't want to like take up my time or, again, feel stupid. But you can do that with ChatGPT and really learn a whole lot of things really quickly, or solve things really quickly that before you had to know enough to Google well. And I think that it kind of lowered the bar of the words that you need to use in order to get what you truly want, and that natural feeling. And even the part where it kind of tricks you into feeling like it's thinking and feeling like it's telling you things, and the personality and stuff. So, by the way, everyone I know always thanks the LM for the response. And there's this little part in the back of their minds that is a mixture of, well, it's just habit, it's being polite. But then the other one is, yeah, when the great uprising comes, I want to be on the nice list, not the naughty list.
Thank God has just gave me a segue, because as you were explaining that, it came up on my iPhone. One of your passwords has been involved in a data breach. And that was one of the questions I had for you, which was these data breaches that seem to happen all the time, that your passwords are getting out, your usernames are getting out, that the older generation are fearing technology because they're holding their information, they're doing something wrong with it, and they're breaching it and selling it. What are data breaches? How do they happen, and what actually are they?
Yeah, so everything that you do online is recorded somewhere, and it's really important to treat that as 100% true, even if it's only several nines true. So I'm sure someone can come up with an example of how they used, this anonymous browser and Tor, the onion router, and did all these things. Okay, sure. But for the most part, for everybody else, everything you do is tracked online, in part because it's monetizable. That the more that companies know about you, the easier it is for them to sell you something that you might want, along with not waste their time and budget on things that you don't. So there's this whole economics of tracking everything. Because everything is tracked, then there's a dark side of people who want to find out who you are so that they can literally rob you. That robbery in the modern era has become something that you can do to anyone from anywhere. And it is really hard to catch people who do it. That you really, you read about the big, takedowns and things like that, and the staggering numbers that are associated. But what you don't read about are the millions of $50 and $100 and $200 thefts that really impact people, and in aggregate are huge, but they're being done just widespread. So a data breach means that some of that data that is stored about you somewhere, and it could be your account, it could be your purchase history, it could be your personal information, whatever, that has escaped what was considered to be a secure storage. And the escapes come a bunch of different ways. The most common one for a long time was just misconfiguration. Like, oh, we didn't realize that anybody could get to that. Like we built this really secure gate, but we forgot to finish half of the fence, that type of thing. And so somebody walks around the gate, which is still locked, and gets this information. Over time, we got better at securing the front door. We finished the gate and the fencing and all that. But for something to be valuable, it still has to be used by people. So somebody has to be able to get in. And so then the attack approach became get the information of somebody who's on the inside, right? Get their password, get their credentials, and then pretend to be them, gain access, and then send things out. Because for the most part, we protect against intruders coming in, but we have far less protection about data coming out. And even that has evolved to get better over time, but you can't have a completely secure system that is still usable by people, that the two things are in constant conflict. And so what you find is not only is data being stored everywhere, but data is being stored everywhere and being sold to others, that you have data brokers out there whose whole job is to collect all the information that's out there. And so they're purchasing from others. And so you end up with data that used to be secure from a company that's following all the best practices, except they're making money by selling it to somebody who is a little less careful, who's selling to somebody who's a little less careful. And at a certain point, you find out that, oh yeah, you are one of the 100 and something million passwords and usernames that have been discovered, right? The Have I Been Owned? What an amazing site that is. Just in this large data dump that is now available. So to kind of close it off, data breach just means stuff that is supposed to be secure is now out there for sale on the open market, or just out there for download.
Wasn't that the whole issue with TikTok? They thought that the government over it was selling parts of your data to different people and kind of using your identity for security reasons or something. It was something to do with data breaches, I remember.
Yeah, so the thing that makes the data breaches really impactful is that lots of people have the same identity in multiple places. So your username and password, especially if it's an email address, your email address and password used in one place and stolen from one place, then makes it possible for someone to gain access if you reuse that somewhere else. And so, Chrome might warn you, hey, there's, you have 17 compromised passwords or whatever, because it's checking. And if you end up reusing the same password and username and password in multiple places, then you're only as secure as the most insecure place. So digital identity, really hard to do well. And that's why now it's kind of a pain. Anytime you log in someplace, they're like, hey, you have to set up multi-factor authentication. And there are different ways of doing that, sending you a text message or sending you an email where the link's only good for 10 minutes, or having the thing that changes your 6-digit code every 30 seconds. All of those have various problems as well, especially if you take that level of security and try to automate it. There's a recent story about a poor guy at Disney whose computer got compromised, and all of his usernames and passwords, including his MFA token generator, was in 1Password. So it was in a otherwise really secure place, but somebody got into that and then caused massive problems for Disney. The guy lost his job. I mean, I feel for him. Like, he was trying to do everything right, and yet somebody got through, in between the links of the fence. And it's really, really hard to make things completely secure and still be able to use them. So you can make them almost unbearably unusable and safe, or you can try to find the balance, and somebody's willing to try harder.
You've been working for yourself basically for like 20 years now. You've been building software, building teams and companies, and your hands in many baskets. You clearly must be skilled at what you do. Like, it doesn't happen by accident. But why did you never decide to go and work for a big tech company?
I did briefly. So early on, I would say kind of the peak of my tech career is I was a web developer on a contract basis at Microsoft Research. And it was amazing to be there. I was there for a little over a year and a half. It was amazing to see what they were doing. This was the late 90s. So they were the most valuable company in the world at the time. And I realized that no matter how good I was, no matter what I did with my personal job, I was not going to move the needle at Microsoft. That I showed up and the stock price stayed roughly the same. I left, the stock price stayed roughly the same. That I was one of, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of employees. And my contribution, as satisfying as it was, and it was great to learn a bunch of things, just wasn't going to be clear and felt. And so that was really the beginning of wanting to do something else where I started it, that there's a difference between, Jay did this and Jay didn't do this. And so I did lots of side projects, which is particularly easy when you're a contractor, because one of the things in the US where they test if you're a contractor or not is, are you prohibited to work with other people? And if the answer is no, you can't, then they're like, okay, well, that means you're an employee. So I was always allowed to do other things. I was always allowed to work on my own stuff. And so once I started figuring out how to do that creation of value and the capture of value, and all of my product stuff where I had these great ideas of building something and it becomes the next big company, those didn't really work because I wasn't good at that part. What I was good at is listening to people tell me what they wanted to solve, like listening to their business problems, and then translating that into software that would help them in some way, shape, or form. So kind of an independent version of what I was already doing, where somebody said, hey, here's the problem, make some web stuff that makes this problem easy. And I was sort of like, the code generator that you see now that's automated, where they didn't have to know how it works. They could just say, oh, we just want something. And so turn that into a services business. And services are really easy to start because all you need is somebody who needs what you do. And if somebody needs what you do, then convincing them is pretty easy, which is different than trying to sell a product where you're like, oh yeah, you really need this product. And people are like, well, I don't have anything like that right now. Why do I need this new thing? Services is like, oh man, I'm trying to do this thing. And the guy that I usually talk to is more expensive or unavailable or whatever. You're doing this thing that I already need. And after doing services for a while, I was able to grow that a little bit and then take the money I was making from the services and start investing it into product development, because as any software entrepreneur will tell you almost without thinking, services don't scale, that you can only get to a certain point before the margins just aren't good enough to get bigger, that you have to have all these layers of management. And while there are large services companies out there, they generally aren't the ones that people love working with, because once you get to a huge services organization, you make your money by not paying your people very well, because if you're paying them well, then there's no money to flow up the chain. Plus you have all these layers of management, et cetera, et cetera.
Is this where Sleightime idea was kind of born?
A little bit. So Sleightime is actually going to be our Trojan horse to the real thing. And the reason why we started with Sleightime is that it is small enough to not be too distracting, but it's big enough to be worthwhile. And in a nutshell, Sleightime allows people to organize how they've allocated their time. And so we often talk about rocks, pebbles, and sand. And your rocks are things like, yeah, you got to sleep. Like if you don't sleep, you will get sick. So everybody get enough sleep. Plan for it. Say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take these 8 hours or whatever and just they're off my schedule. They're dedicated to sleep. And then most people have like some sort of occupational thing, be it a job or school or caregiving or whatever. And that takes a big chunk of time. Where it gets interesting is where you go to like the pebbles, the things that you always have to do, but you don't really want to think about. So like going to the grocery store, exercising, going to the dentist, like these things that come up. It's just sort of the regular business of life, that they're a little bit more flexible than your rocks, but they're not quite as big, and they can be moved if necessary. And then the last part, the sand, is what we use to describe the stuff that you really want to do that you tend to defer because you feel like you don't have enough time. And my hope is that by putting Sleightime out there and showing folks how easy it is to plan for your rocks, to plan for your pebbles, we can then say, guess what? Good news. You have all this time that's available for your sand. And really the sand planning stuff is the rocks of your life, the real meaningful things. So when you look back on your life, no one's going to talk about, oh man, I got this great sleep schedule, or, I spent all this time in the office, et cetera. Right? You always hear people on their deathbed never wanted to spend more time in the office. They want to spend time doing the things that constantly get deprioritized. And what I want to do is make it easy for folks to find that time, and then even more importantly, to share it out with others. Because one of the challenges that everyone I know faces is if you want to get together with somebody, finding available time is pretty difficult. If you want to get together with more than one person, then you end up saying like, okay, well, the two of us are going to be at this place this time. If you can make it, great. If not, then we'll try again sometime in the future. With Sleightime, being able to share out availability and then overlay that to see like, oh, hey, my 4 friends are actually available this Thursday night from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Let's get together and have dinner or go bowling or whatever you want to do, but knowing that time is there. By the same token, just because you're not busy with something doesn't mean you're available. And so being able to set your availability, subtract out the times that you've actually got allocated, and not have to think about it so much. That if you think about it in these layers, and that's what software is really good at, is asking you simple questions and then building up this complex result. If you don't have to think about it, then I'm hoping that people will be able to spend more time doing the things that are meaningful to them.
You seem to be quite the opportunist. You see an opportunity and you find a gap for it. But some of the cool kids nowadays would probably call you a hustler. However, you have an opinion that hustle culture is needing some emergency surgery.
Yeah. And I think it's important to separate the hustle from the culture. And so it's a great talking point because I have done side hustles for 2 decades now, and I cannot tell you enough how important I think that is for folks and their growth. That it's just a great way of exercising different parts of your brain, using some skills that you have and learning other new ones, etc. So side hustles or hustles in general, I think are wonderful. Where hustle culture went wrong was the focus on the culture, and especially with social media, which tends to ruin almost everything. The appearance of being busy, first of all, without the actual substance. And so you had these kind of plastic hustlers where, there's lots of activity, but not a whole lot of progress. So they're always talking about what they're about to do or what they're thinking about doing instead of saying, hey, this is what I did. It was the first kind of nail in the coffin. But then it got worse because it turned into this bizarre competition to show how busy someone could be, so how much they could stack on their plate. And everybody knows that it's false. And yet there's that little part of your brain that says, well, what if it isn't? That means that I'm behind. And so it's this very addictive. It's a really insidious combination of easily accessible, because a lot of people in the hustle culture just absolutely love social media, because talking about your hustle actually gives you a very similar dopamine hit doing your thing. And one of the books that I read early on in my career even said, like, when you have your idea, you can talk about it with people to like vet it or, to get legitimate feedback. But if you talk about it too much, what happens is the energy that was driving it, that tension of, oh, this thing doesn't exist, goes away, because you've talked about it so much, it feels real to you, even though it doesn't exist in the real world. And then eventually it kind of loses its shine and you're like, oh, here's a new thing. And so you go from new thing to new thing instead of doing it. So yeah, I think hustle culture just needs to go away, because anytime we turn something that is negative into a badge of honor, then that's this massive race to the bottom. It would be awesome if we had like sleep culture, where folks are like, oh man, look at how consistent my sleep is. Like, look at how well I've been doing for the last several weeks. Everyone's like, man, I'm behind. Okay, well, I'm going to start sleeping better. We don't have that. We just choose the worst parts of ourselves and say, okay, look how bad I can be and like how much attention I can get while doing it.
Yeah, I've got a queue of self-help gurus in my DMs waiting to just call me every name under the sun. I've made it very, very clear that I hate hustle culture with a passion, but the more you kept talking about it I can see why the culture's gone to shit. I can see, though, there is maybe an opportunity to mend it. It will take a long time, obviously. It's a bit like AI getting advanced. It's going to take a long time. But do you think there's anything that people can do to change the culture? Because hustle culture could be actually beneficial.
Yeah, I think that it's going to get kind of rebranded. It'll be called something else. And what's fantastic is I'm literally here participating in your side hustle while we're talking about this. Like, how meta is that? And the fact that you're doing this is just a great example. So you decided you wanted this thing to exist. You decided like, oh, there's a before this thing exists and there's an after. Like, I want this in the world. And I checked out your episodes. You're not like monetizing the hell out of it. So I know that this isn't the way that you're making money. This is the way that you are learning something, doing a combination of expressing yourself and meeting people. So I'm pretty envious of the number of people you get to have these conversations with. But I also realize it's a bunch of work that you put into it. And at some point when you are successful enough that people will forget about the path that took you there, and the overnight success that you'll have those 2 years, then they'll talk about like, oh, well, you hustled and you did this and you did that. When really what you did was what most normal people call like the work. Like there's a set of work involved in having the concept of a podcast, of finding guests, of coordinating the recordings, of doing the editing, of promoting it, like all these things. And so if you were out there bragging about how much you're doing and how much it's wearing you down and, all these things, then that would be what I consider to be the modern hustle culture. But you're not doing that. Instead, you're doing the important work part to make something exist. And yet that's not the part that gets celebrated, because I think that we don't aspire to that. Like nobody aspires to work as hard as you do to do this thing. Instead, they aspire to having your eventual success once they ignore all the work that went into it. And that shortcutness, especially when you see the people who are faking it, right? They're in front of the rental yacht. They're sitting on somebody else's Lambo instead of their own. They've borrowed however many thousands of dollars to fan it out, take some pictures before they send it back. These types of things are really that surface level where there's this, fake it till you make it, but they're not even faking it in a way that leads to making it. It's more like getting attention just to get attention. And that's the part that needs to go away and be rebranded. We need to take off like the barnacles of social media hype and get back down to like the actual boat that does something.
Something in hustle culture that I've made it very clear that I don't like is the whole routines talk, because I think it's set up right. It's been elevated completely wrong. People think that you should have like morning and night routines for your whole life, which is just completely stupid, because if you've got that your whole life, you haven't actually adapted it into your life. What you now need to build, what you love, is habits. And I think that people forget that habits are just part of your life. Which are the good parts of your routine should be habits, like getting up in the morning and doing some kind of like skincare because you've got bad acne should be a habit. Shouldn't be I have a skincare routine. No, I have a habit of washing my face when I wake up should be the real way to describe it. But you have put a big emphasis in your companies on habits, and I want you to give me a little bit of a brief insight into this one-page habit manual you had some success with employees, but others didn't really like it.
Yeah. So the quote that I'll butcher, that at least the idea of it stuck with me, is to be, boring and regimented in your routine so you can be violently original in your art. That essentially, if you spend your energy thinking about the day-to-day business of life, then you're not going to have enough to do the really creative things. And I think habit and routine and plans are important for that, because there's stuff that you just need to do. And, the other kind of mantra in the company is problems will grow to the point where they demand your attention. And so I really like to address problems at the earliest possible opportunity. It's not necessarily when they're first identified, because sometimes we say, oh yeah, that's not great, but we'll be fine for the next X amount of time. So we're going to put something before that where we address it. And with software, that comes up all the time. Like, oh yeah, this thing isn't great, but you know what? It's fine while we only have 100 people using it, but we really better fix this before we have 1,000 or 1,000,000. I think that having routines, then routines turn into habits. So routine to me is just like, a plan. Having routines and having habits is critical because the more you can do without thinking about it, the more you have available to do the things you really want to do. Again, I think we're coming back to where, social media can take anything and ruin it. And so the whole skincare routine being driven by selling skincare products, or again, the culture of it where like, oh, if you're not posting a picture of yourself with the clock reading 4:30 a.m., like, are you even really living, bro? I mean, come on. You're sleeping to what, 5, 6 a.m.? I mean, you're not out there doing as much as you can. So there's sort of the like do it until it hurts type of mentality, which I do not subscribe to. I mean, and by the way, I have in the past. So, I spent my late teens, early 20s, maybe up into the late 20s, just absolutely working too much, multiple jobs. I was one of those like 80, 100-hour week people that was like, oh yeah, I'm working 80, 100 hours a week. And the only thing that really saved me is at the time, I remember saying, I'm working 80 or 100 hours a week now because I can do that at 23. I know I can't do that at 40 when I have kids. And it turns out I was right. So like, way overextending myself in the early years so that things were easier later, paid off. But it was never about the actual like, hey, look at me. This is, performative. It was, no, I actually want to do these things so I can advance my career, so I can learn the skills, etc. And over that time, I found the busier I got, the more important these habits and routines were because they freed up the space to actually use time effectively and to keep things from falling through the cracks. And that's really to me what habits routines are all about and why they're so important. Because if you don't have these things locked down, then either you're going to spend a lot of time thinking, oh, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this, or you're not going to spend that time and the thing you didn't do will come back until it's something you cannot ignore.
Before we wrap up, can you give a few examples of the habits were in this manual?
So we're talking at an auspicious time where I am finally, after years of largely ignoring my health. So I'd spent tons of time focusing on money and it's like, I'll fix it later. I'll fix it later, fix it later. And you know what? That is not the way to live. Instead, what I have found, especially over the last couple of months, is if I allocate a small but reasonable amount of time and energy towards preparing and eating the right foods, exercising. There are a couple of vitamins that I was kind of deficient in. So like, I'm not going to sit here and bang the supplement drum, but if you are missing something, then yeah, filling it in. Very few changes within just a few weeks actually paid big dividends, that I wasn't as tired. I wasn't, constantly fighting some form of like, ache or pain. And I was able to do more of the unplanned stuff. And for so long, I just made a really bad trade where I thought, oh, okay, yeah, I know I should exercise, but I want to spend that 30 minutes or that hour, whatever, coding or reading or training or doing any of the number of things that were part of my business. And now I realize, okay, I spent 30 minutes walking and yet I end up getting another hour of like comfortable, productive time. So I would recommend to everyone to think about how it is they truly want to live and just make it a conscious choice. I'm not even tell people how to live. Like, I'm not saying, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. But I will say that that there are things that need to be done. And so you can either plan for them, accommodate them, and free up that energy for other things, or not, in which case you're going to end up paying double or triple as it comes back and causes a problem.
Where can people find you, Jay? Where can they get more information about you?
So I have a blog that I haven't touched in a while because I kind of said the things I felt like I had to say. It's called Big Swinging Developer. I used to get up every morning and answer Quora questions while the coffee was brewing. So and find me on Quora. I'm pretty Googleable. I found out that like you type in my name, you type in Jay Greaves, and I come up.
You're the only
And
one.
yeah, that's so having a unique name was helpful. Being old enough that I got my name in the various social platforms or whatever, just because I was like, what's this? Interesting. Okay, I'll put my name in there before there's 10 million people taking every possible combination. So I'm pretty Googleable, and I'm sure you'll link to a blog and website and stuff like that in your show notes. So I'd say people should look at you before they look at me.